Stop scrolling and check your Jefferson nickels before you spend another one. Because hiding in ordinary 5-cent coins could be dates, mint marks, and unusual surfaces that most people would never notice. And today, on Hidden Coin Millions, we're counting down 5 ultra-rare and potentially extremely valuable Monticello 5-cent coins that could make you look at your old nickels completely differently. But here's the shocking part. The coins we're about to reveal don't all look like treasures at first. Some may look dark, worn, spotted, or completely ordinary. Yet one tiny detail could be the reason collectors take a second look. We're going from coin number 5 all the way to number 1, and every coin has a different story. So grab your old nickels, slow down, and start checking those dates and mint marks. Because the next 5 minutes could completely change the way you see a simple 5-cent coin. Stay until the final coin, because you do not want to miss what we're about to uncover. First up, now we're getting into the first coin on our list, and I want you to pay very close attention, because this is exactly the kind of coin that most people would never think twice about. It looks like an ordinary 5-cent piece at first glance, but once you slow down and examine the date, the mint mark, the surfaces, and especially the unusual appearance on the reverse, the story becomes much more interesting. This is the 1998 with D Monticello 5-cent coin, and that little D mint mark is an important part of its identity. The first thing collectors should understand is what this coin represents. The Jefferson 5-cent coin has been one of the most recognizable American coins for generations, featuring Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his famous home, Monticello, on the reverse. By 1998, this design had already been part of American coinage for decades. Millions of Jefferson nickels were produced for everyday commerce, which makes the idea of an ordinary-looking example suddenly becoming a serious collector piece incredibly fascinating. And this is where our particular coin gets interesting. The example we're looking at carries the D mint mark, identifying it as a Denver mint issue. On the reverse, this coin is described as having a brown layer with a noticeable black dot, while still presenting what you describe as a beautiful appearance in very fine condition. Those surface characteristics immediately give collectors something to investigate. When a coin develops unusual coloration, spots, or surface changes, experienced collectors don't simply look at the color and declare it valuable. They examine the entire coin. They want to understand whether the appearance comes from natural aging, environmental exposure, surface alteration, storage conditions, or something more unusual. That is why the details matter. Look closely at the reverse. Monticello dominates the design, and around it are the familiar inscriptions that make this 5-cent piece instantly recognizable. The architectural details, lettering, rim, and overall surface preservation all contribute to the coin's visual character. A brown-toned layer can dramatically change the appearance of a nickel, while a dark spot can become one of the first things that catches a collector's eye. But here's the important part. A strange-looking surface does not automatically mean a rare mint error. Collectors know that distinction matters. A genuine minting variety, an authentic error, a special surface characteristic, and post-mint environmental damage are very different things. That's why authentication and careful examination are so important when a coin appears unusual. Still, when the right combination of date, mint mark, preservation, and distinctive appearance comes together, collectors start paying much closer attention. And that brings us to condition. You described this example as being in very fine condition, which means the coin has experienced circulation but still retains recognizable design detail. On a circulated Jefferson nickel, collectors examine the high points of the design, the lettering, Monticello's architectural features, the rim, and the overall surface. They also look for distracting scratches, heavy wear, corrosion, cleaning, or other damage that could affect desirability. The more attractive and original the coin appears, the more interesting it can become to collectors searching through older or unusual pieces. There is another reason this coin deserves attention in today's collecting world. Jefferson nickels are accessible coins. People can encounter them in collections, old jars, inherited coin boxes, estate collections, and sometimes even ordinary pocket change. That accessibility creates an exciting treasure hunt mentality. You don't necessarily need to begin with an expensive collection. Sometimes the fun starts with one small 5-cent coin that makes you stop and look twice. And that is exactly the kind of moment we're talking about here. Imagine discovering a 1998 with D nickel and noticing that the reverse doesn't look quite like the others you've seen. You turn it over again. You inspect the surface. You check the date. You find the D mint mark. Then you notice the unusual brown coloration and that distinctive black spot. Suddenly, that 5-cent piece doesn't feel quite so ordinary. Now comes the number you've been waiting for. For the specific condition and appearance you provided for this example, the current market value you supplied for this coin is $8,600. Yes, $8,600. That is an enormous figure for a 5-cent coin. And it shows why collectors never want to dismiss an unusual coin simply because its face value is only 5 cents. But remember, an actual sale price can vary substantially depending on authentication, grading, provenance, exact surface characteristics, and what qualified buyers are willing to pay. So treat the $8,600 figure here as the valuation supplied for this video, not as a guaranteed price for every 1998 with D. Jefferson nickel. And this is where the real treasure hunting lesson begins. If you ever come across a Jefferson nickel that looks unusual, don't immediately clean it, polish it, scratch it, or try to improve its appearance. Leave the surface alone. Cleaning can permanently damage collector value and remove evidence that might help determine the coin's history. Instead, handle the coin carefully by its edges. Use good lighting. Examine both sides. Check the date and mint mark. Look closely at the lettering, rim, design details, and unusual spots. If something genuinely looks different, compare it with trusted references or have the coin examined by a qualified numismatist or professional grading service. And most importantly, don't judge a coin only by its face value. 5 cents can be 5 cents in everyday spending, but in the world of collecting, the right combination of rarity, condition, authenticity, and demand can completely change the conversation. The 1998 with D. Monticello 5-cent coin we've covered today is a perfect reminder of that excitement. Its brown reverse coloration, distinctive black spot, Denver mint mark, and described very fine condition give collectors several details to investigate, and the valuation you've supplied makes this first entry a serious attention grabber. But we're only at number 1. There are still 4 more coins coming, and if this first nickel already surprised you, you definitely don't want to miss what comes next. This is Hidden Coin Millions, where we bring you fresh coin discoveries and collector-focused videos every day. So before you move on, take a second look at the Jefferson nickels around you. Check those dates. Check those mint marks. Look at those surfaces. Because sometimes the most exciting part of coin collecting isn't knowing what you have. It's discovering that you may have been looking at it all along. And remember, never clean a potentially valuable coin before getting it properly evaluated. Next up, now we move to coin number 2, and this one takes the suspense to another level. If you thought the first coin was interesting, don't look away, because we're stepping back into an era when Jefferson nickels were a major part of everyday American commerce. And hidden among those ordinary 5-cent pieces can be coins with characteristics that make collectors stop, look twice, and start asking one very important question: what exactly am I looking at? Our second coin is the 1963 with D. Monticello 5-cent coin. And before we go any further, remember that date, 1963, because this coin comes from an important period in the history of the Jefferson nickel. The Jefferson 5-cent design had already become a familiar part of American coinage by this time. Thomas Jefferson appears prominently on the obverse, while Monticello, his Virginia home, occupies the reverse. The design connects the coin to one of the most recognizable figures and landmarks in American history. But collectors don't look at these nickels simply as pieces of spending money. They examine the tiny details that can separate an ordinary circulated example from a coin worthy of serious attention. And this particular example has one of those details that immediately catches the eye. The coin is described as having a black shade and spots across the reverse, combined with an extra fine condition. That combination creates an intriguing visual appearance. When you look at the reverse, Monticello stands at the center of the design, surrounded by the familiar inscriptions and lettering. On a coin that has developed darker areas or noticeable spots, the contrast can make the architectural details appear dramatically different. But don't make the mistake of assuming that every dark spot automatically means an expensive mint error. That's not how serious collecting works. Collectors carefully distinguish between original mint characteristics, circulation marks, environmental effects, toning, staining, corrosion, and genuine minting errors. A dark appearance can come from many different causes, and professional examination is often necessary before making a major valuation claim. That's exactly why this coin deserves a closer look rather than a quick judgment. Now let's talk about the D mint mark. That small letter tells us this example was produced at the Denver Mint. For collectors, the mint mark is one of the first things to check whenever you're examining a Jefferson nickel. The date tells you when the coin belongs in the timeline, while the mint mark helps identify where it was struck. Put those two details together and you have a specific collectible identity, 1963 with D. And now, the condition becomes even more important. You've described this coin as being in extra fine condition. That means we're talking about a coin where significant design detail remains visible despite its history of circulation. Collectors examining a Jefferson nickel at this level will pay attention to the portrait, lettering, rim, Monticello building, steps, fields, and high points. They also look carefully for scratches, cleaning, damage, discoloration, and other surface problems. The reverse is particularly fascinating here because of the black shade and spots you've described. Imagine holding the coin under strong light and slowly rotating it. At one angle, the dark areas may dominate your view. Rotate it again, and the remaining design details begin to stand out. You inspect the rim. You examine the lettering. You study Monticello. Then you turn the coin over and check the obverse. This is where coin hunting becomes exciting. A coin can sit unnoticed for decades until someone finally takes the time to inspect it properly. And that is why collectors should never judge a Jefferson nickel simply by its 5-cent face value. The coin itself is made from the traditional copper-nickel composition used for Jefferson nickels during this period. That composition gave the coin its familiar silvery appearance and durability for everyday circulation. But decades of handling, storage, environmental exposure, and contact with other materials can dramatically affect the surface appearance of an individual example. So when you see an older nickel with an unusual dark shade, spots, or other unusual characteristics, don't immediately clean it. That's extremely important. Never take a potentially collectible coin and aggressively polish it just because you don't like the way the surface looks. Cleaning can permanently alter the original surface and potentially destroy information that collectors and graders need to examine. Preserve the coin exactly as you found it whenever possible. Instead, hold it carefully by the edges, use proper lighting, and examine both sides without touching the main surfaces. Now we're approaching the moment that makes this particular coin so dramatic. You've been waiting to hear what this example has been valued at. For the 1963 with D. Monticello 5-cent coin in the extra fine condition and with the appearance you described, the market value you supplied for this video is $70,500. Yes, $70,500. That is an extraordinary figure attached to a 5-cent coin, and it's exactly the kind of number that makes collectors realize why unusual coins deserve careful attention. But let me make one thing very clear for anyone watching. $70,500 is the valuation you provided for this specific video example. It should not be treated as a guaranteed price for every 1963 with D. Jefferson nickel with dark spots or unusual coloration. Actual market prices depend on authentication, grading, exact condition, surface originality, documented varieties or errors, and what buyers are willing to pay. And that distinction is incredibly important, because if you find a 1963 with D nickel in your own collection, don't automatically assume it is worth $70 a hundredth. Instead, use this story as motivation to examine the coin carefully and determine exactly what makes your example different. That's where the real collector mindset begins. Look at the date. Look at the mint mark. Look at Monticello. Study the lettering. Inspect the rim. Examine the surfaces under different lighting. And if something genuinely unusual appears, get the coin professionally evaluated before making any major conclusions. The best collectors aren't simply people who find old coins. They're people who notice details that everyone else ignores. And this 1963 with D nickel gives us plenty of details to investigate. Its age gives it historical character. Its Denver mint mark gives it a specific place in American coinage history. Its described extra fine condition gives it additional collector appeal. And the dark, reverse shading and spots give the coin a distinctive visual identity that demands closer examination. That's what makes the hunt so addictive. You could have hundreds of ordinary coins around you and never think about them. Then one day, a particular nickel catches your attention because something doesn't look quite right. You pick it up. You turn it over. You check the date. You find the D. You inspect the reverse. And suddenly, you're no longer looking at pocket change. You're looking at a piece of American coin history that may deserve professional attention. That's the excitement behind collecting. And remember, the market for desirable collectible coins can change over time. Coins with strong collector demand can attract greater attention when properly authenticated and preserved, but no future increase is guaranteed. So don't treat any valuation as a promise of automatic appreciation. Protect the coin. Don't clean it. Don't scratch it. Don't attempt to alter the surface. Keep it safely stored and document exactly what you found. Because sometimes the smallest objects carry the biggest stories. And sometimes the coin everyone else ignores is the one that makes you stop and say, "Wait, how did I miss this?" This is Hidden Coin Millions, and we're bringing you fresh coin-focused videos and discoveries every day. But don't go anywhere yet. This is only coin number 2. We've already gone from a 1998 with D. Jefferson nickel to a much older 1963 with D example with an extraordinary valuation attached to the specific condition described for this video. And if you think that was the biggest surprise on today's list, next up, now we have reached coin number 3, and this one has a detail that can make collectors stop immediately. There is no mint mark. Take another look at that date, 1976. This isn't just another date on a Jefferson 5-cent coin. 1976 was a remarkable year in American history, the year of the nation's bicentennial celebration, and Jefferson nickels from this era became part of that enormous chapter in American coinage history. But what makes the example we're discussing today especially interesting is what appears on the reverse. Green and gray dots surrounding the Monticello design, combined with an almost fine condition. And this is where you need to slow down, because sometimes the most interesting part of an old coin isn't something screaming at you from the surface. Sometimes it's a tiny detail that makes you ask, why does this coin look different? That is exactly what happens with this example. The first thing to notice is the missing mint mark. On Jefferson nickels, a Philadelphia issue can carry no mint mark, while Denver issues carry a D and San Francisco issues carry an S. PCGS specifically notes that Jefferson nickels without a mint mark traditionally indicate Philadelphia production. So when you see 1976 with no mint mark, you're looking at a Philadelphia-produced Jefferson nickel. Now let's turn our attention to the reverse. There sits Monticello, Thomas Jefferson's historic Virginia home, surrounded by the familiar inscriptions and the denomination. But on this particular example, you've described green and gray dots appearing across the reverse. That unusual coloration immediately makes the coin visually distinctive. But here's where an experienced collector thinks differently from someone simply searching for a big number. Green and gray spots can have different causes. They may result from environmental exposure, surface contamination, toning, storage conditions, or other changes that occurred after the coin left the mint. They should not automatically be described as a rare mint error or proof of extraordinary rarity. That's why the surface needs to be examined carefully. And there is another major reason not to rush to judgment: condition. You've described this coin as being in almost fine condition. That means the coin has experienced substantial circulation, and the higher areas of the design show wear. Collectors examining a circulated Jefferson nickel will carefully inspect Jefferson's portrait, the lettering, the rim, Monticello, and the overall preservation of the fields. The reverse is especially important. Look at Monticello. Look at the building's outline. Look at the surrounding lettering. Look at the rim. Then look at those green and gray spots. Are they part of the coin's natural aging? Are they environmental? Are they deposits? Are they toning? Is there an actual mint-made characteristic hiding underneath? Those are the questions a serious collector wants answered. And that investigation is what makes coin collecting so exciting. A coin doesn't have to look perfect to deserve attention. Sometimes an unusual appearance is exactly what makes you stop and investigate. But the investigation has to come before the conclusion. The 1976 Jefferson nickel is also historically interesting because it belongs to a period when the United States was celebrating its bicentennial. Yet unlike the famous bicentennial quarter, half-dollar and dollar designs, the Jefferson nickel retained its familiar Jefferson and Monticello design. The coin, therefore, gives collectors an interesting connection to the year 1976 without requiring a special commemorative nickel design. And here's something many casual collectors don't realize. A coin can be historically interesting without automatically being rare. Reports that more than 300 million regular strike 1,976 Jefferson nickels were produced, and ordinary circulated examples are common. The real challenge becomes finding exceptionally preserved examples, particularly those with strong full steps detail on Monticello. So why are we paying such close attention to this particular example? Because we're not talking about a generic coin in isolation. We're talking about the exact coin described for this video with its specific appearance, green and gray reverse spots, and almost fine condition. And that brings us to the moment you've been waiting for. The valuation supplied for this particular example, $42,900. Yes, $42,900. That is an extraordinary valuation for a 5-cent coin. But remember, this figure is the valuation you supplied for the specific example featured in this video. It is not a verified current market price for ordinary 1,976 Philadelphia Jefferson nickels. Actual value can depend dramatically on authentication, grading, originality of the surfaces, documented varieties or errors, and the exact characteristics of the individual coin. That distinction is crucial. If you find a 1976 nickel without a mint mark, don't assume you've instantly found a $42,900 coin. Instead, look at it as the beginning of an investigation. Check the date. Confirm the absence of a mint mark. Study the reverse. Look at Monticello. Examine the steps. Inspect the spots. Look for unusual die characteristics. And most importantly, don't clean it. Never take an unusual coin and start polishing away the surface. A potentially important coin should be preserved exactly as found until its characteristics can be properly evaluated. If the green and gray coloration is unusual, document it. Photograph both sides under good lighting. Compare the coin with authenticated examples. And if the coin appears genuinely exceptional, have it examined by a qualified professional. That's how you protect the possibility of discovering something important. And this is where the phrase, hidden coin millions, really comes alive. Because the excitement isn't simply about finding an old nickel. It's about discovering something that makes you stop and investigate. It's about realizing that the tiny details can matter. It's about looking at coins differently from the person who simply throws them into a jar and forgets about them. The 1976 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel is a perfect example of why that mindset matters. Its no mint mark status identifies its Philadelphia origin. Its year connects it to America's bicentennial era. Its Monticello reverse carries the classic Jefferson design. And the green and gray spots you've described give this particular example a distinctive appearance that demands closer inspection. And when you're dealing with unusual surfaces, condition becomes even more important. Don't confuse a dramatic appearance with guaranteed rarity. Don't assume a spot automatically means an error. And don't let anyone convince you that every old nickel is secretly worth a fortune. Real collecting requires patience. It requires observation. And it requires knowing exactly what you're looking at. That's what separates a serious collector from someone simply searching for a lucky number. But here's the exciting part. We're only at coin number 3. That means there are still 2 more Monticello 5-cent coins waiting for us. And after seeing how much attention a simple date, a missing mint mark, and an unusual reverse can generate, you should already be looking at your own Jefferson nickels differently. Maybe there's an old coin sitting inside a collection you've forgotten about. Maybe there's a nickel with an unusual surface waiting inside an inherited coin box. Maybe you've walked past something interesting hundreds of times without ever turning it over. So keep your eyes open. Keep your coins safe. Never clean a potentially collectible piece. And remember that valuations must always be confirmed against the exact coin, its authentication, grade, and market evidence. This is Hidden Coin Millions, and we're bringing you fresh coin content and new discoveries every day. Coin number 3 has now been revealed. But we're not finished. Coin number 4 is coming next. And the closer we get to the top of this list, the more important every tiny detail becomes. So stay with me. Next up, now we are at coin number 4, and this is where the hunt becomes even more interesting. We have already looked at unusual Jefferson nickels from different decades, but this time we're moving into the 1990s, and there is one small detail you need to notice immediately. The date is 1990, and beside that date, you'll find a tiny letter that can completely identify where this coin was produced. The letter is P. That means we're looking at a 1990 with P. Monticello 5-cent coin, a Jefferson nickel struck at the Philadelphia Mint. At first glance, it might look like nothing more than another old 5-cent piece. But that's exactly why collectors learn to slow down. The coins that look ordinary can sometimes become the most interesting ones when their date, mint mark, condition, and surfaces are examined together. And this particular example has a feature that immediately gives it character. You've described the coin as having a gray layer and being in circulated condition. Now, don't let that description make you look away. Circulation tells a story. Every small mark, every change in color, every area of wear can reveal something about where a coin has been and how it has survived. A Jefferson nickel that has passed through years of everyday commerce has been handled, stored, exchanged, exposed to different environments, and eventually preserved by someone who decided it was worth keeping. That's the fascinating journey behind an old coin. And on this 1990 with P example, the gray appearance across the surface gives the coin a distinctive look. But there is something extremely important collectors should understand. A gray layer by itself does not automatically prove that a coin is a rare mint error or an exceptionally valuable variety. Surface coloration can develop for many reasons, including normal aging, environmental exposure, storage conditions, toning, or other forms of surface change. That's why experienced collectors don't stop at appearance. They investigate. They examine the date. They confirm the mint mark. They study the fields. They inspect the lettering. They examine Monticello. They check the rim. And they look for anything that could distinguish the coin from an ordinary example. That's the difference between simply owning a coin and actually understanding a coin. Now think about what the P mint mark means. The Philadelphia Mint is one of the most historically important United States mint facilities. A tiny letter on a Jefferson nickel can therefore tell you something about its production history. When you're searching through a collection, that small P can instantly give the coin a more specific identity. And that's why I always tell collectors to check the mint mark before putting an old nickel away. Don't just look at the portrait. Don't just look at the date. Turn the coin over. Look at Monticello. Then check everything, because the reverse can reveal details that you might completely miss from the front. On this example, the gray surface layer is part of what makes the coin visually distinctive. But because you've described it as circulated condition, we also have to consider wear. A circulated Jefferson nickel may show softened details on the highest points of the design. The portrait can lose sharpness. The lettering may show wear. The Monticello building can become less defined. The fields can carry marks accumulated during years of handling. And that's where collector demand becomes complicated. Collectors generally want originality, attractive surfaces, strong details, and authentic characteristics. If a coin has been cleaned, artificially altered, heavily damaged, or exposed to harsh environmental conditions, that can significantly affect how collectors view it. So if you ever discover an unusual 1990p nickel, resist the temptation to make it look better. Don't polish it. Don't scrape it. Don't use chemicals. Don't try to remove the gray layer. Preserve it exactly as you found it, because that surface may contain information that a professional needs to evaluate. And now we arrive at the number that makes this coin number 4 so dramatic. For the specific example and condition you supplied for today's video, the market value you're assigning to this coin is $14,600. That's $14,600 attached to a 5-cent coin. Let that sink in. A tiny Jefferson nickel carrying the famous Monticello design can become the center of a serious collector investigation when its characteristics are unusual enough. But once again, I want to make this crystal clear for everyone watching. $14,600 is the valuation supplied for this specific video example. It is not a guaranteed current price for every 1990 with P. Jefferson nickel. Current records show that exceptional certified 1990 with P examples can command significant premiums, including a recorded auction result of $2,990, but actual prices vary dramatically by grade and specific characteristics. That is exactly why authentication and professional grading matter. The difference between an ordinary circulated coin and an exceptional certified example can be enormous. So if you've got one of these nickels at home, don't start calculating your fortune before you've identified exactly what you're holding. Start with the basics. Check that date, 1990. Check that mint mark, P. Inspect the reverse. Study the gray coloration. Look carefully at Monticello. Examine the steps. Look at the rim. Then inspect the obverse for unusual characteristics. Use magnification if necessary, but don't touch the main surfaces with your fingers. And if the coin truly appears unusual, get a professional opinion. That is how serious collectors protect potentially valuable pieces. Now here's what makes the hunt so exciting. The coin doesn't need to announce its importance. It doesn't come with a giant label saying, rare. It doesn't tell you what it's worth. It simply sits there, quietly, waiting for someone to notice. And that is why old Jefferson nickels continue to fascinate collectors across the United States. Millions of people have handled these coins over the decades. Some were spent, some were saved, some were placed into jars, and some disappeared into collections. Every surviving coin has its own journey, and sometimes the journey ends with someone discovering that the coin deserves a much closer look. That's the feeling we're chasing here at Hidden Coin Millions. Not just the excitement of a big number, the excitement of discovery, the excitement of finding something that other people overlooked, the excitement of holding a piece of American coinage history and realizing that the details matter. And this 1990 with P. Jefferson nickel has exactly the kind of characteristics that make an investigation interesting. A recognizable date, a Philadelphia mint mark, a gray surface layer, and the circulated condition you've described. But we're not finished. This is coin number 4. That means there is only one coin left on today's countdown. One final Monticello 5-cent coin. One final opportunity to discover a coin with a story that could make you look twice at every nickel you encounter. So don't go anywhere. Keep your collection nearby. Keep your eyes open. And remember, one of the most important rules in coin collecting: never clean an unusual coin before it has been properly examined, because the surface you're tempted to remove could be part of the story. This is Hidden Coin Millions, freshly updated with new coin content every day. And we've reached the final stretch. Next up, and now we have reached the final coin in today's countdown. Coin number 5. The coin we've been building toward. The coin that takes us all the way back to 1940. And if you've been watching every coin carefully, you already know that the older Jefferson nickels can become especially fascinating when their condition and surfaces stand out from the crowd. This is the 1940 Monticello 5-cent coin with no mint mark, and you've described this particular example as having a black and brown shade across the reverse while remaining in uncirculated condition. And that combination is exactly why this final entry deserves your full attention. Look at the date, 1940. That takes us back to the earliest era of the Jefferson nickel design. Thomas Jefferson's portrait had only recently appeared on the 5-cent coin, and Monticello had become the defining image on the reverse. For collectors, a Jefferson nickel from this early period isn't simply an old 5-cent piece. It represents the beginning of a design that would remain one of the most recognizable American coin designs for generations. And now look at the mint mark. There isn't one. For Jefferson nickels of this era, a missing mint mark can indicate production at the Philadelphia Mint. That makes this a 1940 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel based on the no mint mark description. But the date and mint location are only the beginning. The biggest attraction of this particular example is its uncirculated condition. That word matters. A coin that remains uncirculated has avoided the normal wear associated with everyday commerce. Instead of being repeatedly exchanged from hand to hand, an uncirculated example can retain much sharper original design detail. And that's exactly what collectors want to investigate. Look closely at Jefferson's portrait. Look at the lettering. Look at the rim. Then turn the coin over. There is Monticello. And surrounding that historic building is the unusual black and brown shading you've described. Now this is where the story becomes especially interesting. An unusual dark surface can make an old nickel look dramatically different, but appearance alone doesn't establish a rare mint error. Black or brown coloration can result from natural toning, environmental exposure, storage, surface contamination, or other changes that occurred during the coin's lifetime. That's why the uncirculated condition becomes such an important part of the investigation. If the coin genuinely retains original surfaces and strong detail, collectors will want to know exactly how those surfaces developed. Were they natural? Are they stable? Is the coloration attractive? Is the surface original? Is there evidence of cleaning or alteration? Could there be a documented variety or mint-made characteristic underneath those colors? Those are the questions that turn an interesting coin into a serious numismatic investigation. And this is also why you should never clean an old coin simply because the surface doesn't look bright. That is one of the biggest mistakes a new collector can make. A coin that looks dark or aged may have an original surface that collectors actually want preserved. Polishing, rubbing, chemicals, or abrasive materials can permanently change that surface. So if you ever discover a 1940 Jefferson nickel with unusual coloration, handle it carefully by the edges and keep the original surface untouched until it has been properly examined. Because this is where the value conversation becomes extremely important. For the specific 1940 no mint mark example, with the black and brown reverse appearance and uncirculated condition that you provided, the valuation for this video is $78,400. Yes, $78,400. That is an extraordinary valuation for a 5-cent coin. But remember, this is the figure you supplied for this particular video example, not a guarantee that every 1940 Philadelphia Jefferson nickel is worth that amount. Actual market value can depend heavily on authentication, grade, surface originality, varieties, errors, eye appeal, and verified auction or dealer results. And that's exactly why serious collectors don't stop after seeing a big number. They investigate. They authenticate. They compare. They grade. They preserve. That is the process. Now imagine finding a 1940 Jefferson nickel in an old collection. At first, you might notice the age. Then you see the missing mint mark. You turn it over. You notice the darker reverse. You inspect the Monticello design. Then you realize the coin appears to have remarkably little circulation wear. Suddenly, you're asking a completely different question. Not, what is this 5-cent coin? But, what exactly makes this particular example different? That is the question every serious collector wants answered. And this is why the final coin on our list is so fascinating. It combines an early Jefferson nickel date with a Philadelphia no-mint mark identity, the distinctive black and brown reverse appearance you've described, and an uncirculated condition that could make preservation and authentication especially important. The historical side is fascinating too. These early Jefferson nickels were produced during the opening years of one of America's longest-running coin designs. Monticello became a permanent visual symbol on the reverse, and Jefferson's portrait became instantly recognizable to generations of Americans. So when you hold a 1940 Jefferson nickel, you're holding a piece of that early chapter. And if the surfaces are genuinely original and the coin is truly uncirculated, that is something worth protecting. Don't put it loose in a pocket. Don't throw it into a jar with other coins. Don't stack it carelessly with pieces that can scratch its surfaces. And absolutely don't polish it. Instead, keep it in an appropriate protective holder and seek professional evaluation if the coin appears exceptional. The most important collector lesson from this entire countdown is simple. Details matter. The date matters. The mint mark matters. The condition matters. The surfaces matter. The authenticity matters. And sometimes the smallest difference between two coins can completely change their desirability. That is why you should never automatically ignore an old Jefferson nickel. But at the same time, don't believe every unbelievable price you see online. A coin's true market value needs to be supported by the exact coin's characteristics and reliable market evidence. That balance is what makes real coin collecting so exciting. You aren't simply chasing a number. You're chasing the story behind the coin. You're trying to understand why one piece is ordinary while another captures the attention of collectors. And that's exactly what we've done with this final entry. The 1940 no-mint mark Monticello 5-cent coin you've described gives us an early Jefferson nickel, an unusual black and brown reverse appearance, and an uncirculated condition that makes preservation and examination especially important. And with the valuation you've supplied for this particular example, reaching $78,400, it's certainly a dramatic way to finish today's countdown. But here's the bigger message. You don't have to own a giant collection to start looking for interesting coins. You don't need a vault. You don't need thousands of dollars sitting on a table. Start with what you already have. Check the dates. Check the mint marks. Turn every coin over. Look at the surfaces. And if something looks different, don't ignore it. Investigate it. Because sometimes the coin that catches your eye isn't the coin you expected to find. And sometimes a tiny piece of metal can carry a history far bigger than its face value. This is Hidden Coin Millions, and we're freshly updated with new coin content every day for collectors and treasure hunters across the United States. If you've stayed with me through all 5 coins, you've now seen 5 very different Jefferson nickel stories, from later issues to older examples, from circulated pieces to an uncirculated 1940 example. And now, I want you to remember one final rule. Never clean a potentially valuable coin before professional examination. Protect the surface. Protect the evidence. Protect the possibility. Because the real treasure hunt doesn't end when the video ends. It begins the moment you turn over the next nickel. So check your collection. Check those old jars. Check those inherited coins. And check the dates you've been ignoring. Because you never know when one small Jefferson nickel might be worth taking a much closer look at. This is Hidden Coin Millions. Keep searching, keep learning, and never underestimate the smallest coins in your collection.